Hey everybody, this is Cosby, and we're going to start. I'm going to add Tariiq for this conversation about toxic masculinity. Hey, how's it going? How's it going, everybody? We're taking a couple minutes before Tariiq comes on, and we're talking about toxic masculinity today. It's a great conversation. Definitely look forward to it. Hey, Charlene. How's it going? How's it going? So while we're waiting on Tariiq to come in, I just wanted to talk about, the reason why I came up with this topic is because it's something that has been, just there since I was a child. There's always been like, some of this ain't right. Some of the ways that we've been taught, whether it's, my friends interacting with women, whether it's, people in the street. Let me see. I'm trying to add you, Tariiq. Go. Yeah, man. So it's just something that's just really, really pressing, and especially as the older we get, and now a lot of us have kids, and our kids are becoming teenagers. Or it's definitely something we should talk about, something we should unpack. Um, so yeah. So to get it started, I just wanted to give you the definition of toxic masculinity. It's a set of attitudes and ways of behaving stereotypically associated with or expected of men, regarded as having a negative impact on men and society as a whole. So we're not saying that masculinity is, necessarily toxic in its form, but just like, there's toxic water, there's toxic waste, there's toxic radiation. These are all things that, when they're out of their they're out of their whack, it's harmful. And so, you can be a man, you don't have to be toxic, in your behaviors. And that a lot of times we view toxic masculinity in the way that it affects women, but it also affects men. The suicide rates of men, the rates of depression, et cetera, et cetera. And these are just the ones that are explained and told. A lot of men deal with these things without, in silence because of toxic masculinity. That's another part. Is silence, and that you're not going to actually be honest with yourself, and that's problematic. And so I want us to just take the time to really get into what is toxic masculinity, why it's bad, and what we can do to change. I am a person who dealt with the same things. I was raised over the same music and media with the same ideas that were shared in the community, but there were breaking points and points in which I had people who were saying that it was time to change. Sorry about it. I'm trying to get Tariiq to invite. Let me see. So we're just waiting. So I can just start. While Tariiq is about to join. One of the first things I want to talk about when it comes to toxic masculinity is that there needs to be a culture of accountability. Like there can't be any more, boys will be boys or men will be men. There needs to be, a reckoning and an understanding of saying, hey, you know what? Toxic masculinity exists. And once we get there, then we have, room to grow. Because we have to be honest in saying that there are some parts of masculinity that, are in fact toxic. And like you have to be accountable for your actions and your choices. Like a lot of times we allow men to just ignore what they need to be, and the fact that they're not good at being people is not enough for us to say, okay, that's okay. And so like you have to understand a direct relationship between cause and effect. Like our actions or inaction are something that are harmful. And so within toxic masculinity, a lot of times it gives us that out that allows us to just not, just be. And so that shows up, in our relationships. It shows up, in our friendships. It shows up, in our parenting or absentee parenting. And these are all things that, with toxic masculinity, you're given a pass. You're not actually taking a task. And so, that is problematic in itself. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on with Tariiq, but we're still trying to get my man over here. Accountability. I mean, and this is something that I had to actually accept for myself. Like, I'm thinking, I'm a good man. I'm not out here, harming women. But like, am I really? Like, am I being accountable for any emotional damage? Am I being accountable for any, interpersonal strain? Like, am I doing the work? And honestly, there've been times where I wasn't. There have been times where I wasn't pulling my weight. Whether in any type of relationship, because being a man, toxic masculinity allowed me to do the bare minimum. All I had to do was be better than the next man. That was if that guy's awful, I can just be a little less terrible. And so, and that's okay. There's plenty of good men who are, consider themselves good, but they're just not as bad. And then I think, with that toxic masculinity, it doesn't put us to task. It doesn't, allow us to look within and allow us to hold ourselves accountable. And even when the community attempts to hold us accountable, I mean, we don't. I mean, there is no societal pressure for us to be better. A lot of society pressure is on women to, be the better person, to do the better thing. And men, we just out here. Let me try to invite you. This is bugging. So yeah. So it's waiting for Tariiq. Same simple. All right. While Tariq's joining, we can move on to the second part, and I'll let him talk about accountability. When he gets in, self-responsible language, and that's connected to accountability. Is I, there's a direct correction. There's a direct connection between the words you use, the beliefs you hold, and the actions you take. Like, you are, part of the problem. If there is a problem, it's you. And you have to explore like how your harmful words and actions have affected, everyone around you. And then in order to develop healthy masculinity, you have to see what is toxic masculinity. Like, you got to alter your language pattern to, to be, I mean, for example, there was a big thing about men calling women females for, a time, and men would fight for their right to call women females, even though women is right there. And women is, a woman is a human female. So why would you use that term that is, broad when you have a narrow term like women? And a lot of it was toxic masculinity. Like, a man is right, and that he can't be wrong, and that a woman shouldn't tell a man what to do. Our use of the word, hoe and bitch. Those are words that become pronouns just for women, and that's language that is unhealthy, and there is no reason that we should use it. And so, and what happens when you're using words and you're communicating in that way, you begin to identify, and it emboldens you to the point where you view these people as these words you use, instead of the human that they are, the women that they are. So it's about a language of responsibility and integrity. And that's important. I mean, as a man, like, you have to be responsible. All right, let me see. Okay, I think this might work this time. Dang, Tariiq, man.
There it goes, man.
Got me out here sweating, dog. Like,
I mean, brother, you were spitting some knowledge there when I could actually hear you. I don't I can't even call what just happened.
I don't know,
But
man.
thank
I'm
you
sitting
for
here.
having me.
I'm being tech support and moderating and hosting at the same time. Like, yeah, this is
Dude,
much
you
respect to
got
everybody.
skills, man. You got skills, man, to be able to handle all that. Because I would have been crying at this point.
Yo, I was about to
Like,
close it, man. I was
Lord,
about
where
to say,
you
you know
at?
what? Toxic masculinity is wrong, and we're done. Like, that is it. Like, if you're toxic and you're male, stop it, and that's
I
it. That's
mean,
the end of it.
and that probably would have been enough too. But I'm here. I'm ready to go. I'm
Okay.
ready for this now. Okay. All right.
So, I mean, now we're here. Conversation. I'm good at these. Talking to myself is
Yeah.
it's nice to
I'm
see you,
with you with that
brother.
one.
It's nice to see you.
Same. Good to
Look
see
at
you,
me,
man. I haven't
brother.
seen you in a while.
Look
I
at
see yours. I
healthy
see what's going on.
masculinity just now. I was able to compliment a man and be
And I was
positive.
able to receive it. I was able to receive it and give it back,
Absolutely. No pause, none of that. We were just males who can show appreciation to other men.
Exactly.
So yes, before we go back into self-responsible language, can we get into a culture of accountability?
Okay.
How do you feel about that, man? What is accountability to you as a man?
Accountability is taking responsibility for your actions or being made to take responsibility for your actions. I remember probably had to be 2017 when the Harvey Weinstein thing started happening and, people were starting to get called out for the behavior. And Charlemagne the God used a term. He said, this is the age of accountability. And that hit me because we have hit a time where bad behavior is no longer acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And however you want to qualify that bad behavior. You can't just go out and do the things that you felt comfortable doing 10, 20, 30, a century ago. Life isn't as one-sided
Mm-hmm.
as it was at that point. So now you actually have to show respect to people,
Mm-hmm.
to women. As a man, you have to show that respect in a way that you probably hadn't considered before. The jokes have to stop. The touching, the unwelcome touching has to stop. You even saw people getting on Joe Biden during the election about that. And so when you think about accountability, you think about being held responsible for your actions. And if you can't be held responsible for your actions, then this is a lawless society. So you have to be held responsible. You have to be held responsible.
I mean, absolutely, man. I dislike comparing, sexism and racism, but I will draw parallels. I mean, a lot of people, like there was a time in which black people couldn't walk on the sidewalk, where if, a white person accosted a black person, the police would be like, what'd you do? You probably deserved it. And for many, many years, a woman gets accosted on the sidewalk and a cop might ask, what was she wearing? What were you doing?
Exactly.
Why were you out there so late?
Out that late. Right.
So society changes. And then, when people are like, oh no, cancel culture. Oh no, like, what is this? I'm like, no. Accountability is growing. We're getting to a point in which people are feeling safer and people are feeling more and more emboldened to express the fact that they want to feel safe. And so they're letting you know that, hey, this is important to me.
Not acceptable. And this is acceptable.
I want to feel safe and I demand to feel safe. And if you are victimizing people, you got to stop. So, anytime somebody's pushing back against some of this, pushing back against accountability, I'm like, what are you doing? Like that is toxic for you. If someone's telling you, stop doing this is harming me, and you say, no, that's toxic. You're harmful.
And it's power. It's power. That's what you're pushing back against.
Yes.
You're pushing back against that and someone else's, what they perceive as being their power and their right and their control. And that's what they're fighting you against. The reason why people are fighting so hard against cancel culture is because they don't like the shift in power. And that's what happens oftentimes with men who are accused of sexual assault or, just bad behavior. It's the fact that they feel like their power is being threatened. And so when you're calling people out, you're threatening their power. And people fight. Wars are fought over power.
Absolutely.
Wars are created and fought over power. And so that's what you're pushing back. That's what you're pushing back against constantly. But that doesn't mean you stop. because that power does not mean dominion. You have to shift that and check out the way that there's something. What's the word I'm thinking about? How we're all we have to work together. It's a matter of learning how to work together and be more egalitarian. We can't look at the old traditional models and think about, okay, well, this is your position, this is my position. No, those old models don't work anymore. We are on a much more level playing field. In our community, oftentimes women are in a much more financially powerful position. So even looking at that and thinking about how that plays a role in toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
And how men push back against that. And so there's so many different layers, but it's really about, this is a much more level playing field. This is where it's supposed to be. And you can't just dominate in the way that you want to. When I think about toxic masculinity, the words that come to mind the most are domination, control, and there's another one, another D. I can't remember it. But those are the main things. How do you dominate somebody? How do you control somebody? Are you able to dictate to people, what it is that you want? And the fact that you can no longer do that and that you actually have to share in the power, that's what people are fighting the hardest against.
Absolutely, man. Something, in that word you were speaking is that there is this idea, like people are like, oh no, masculinity is, toxic, or oh no, like they're pushing back against the word. If we called it harmful masculinity rather than, healthy masculinity, because that's what toxic masculinity is, harmful to yourself and others. And so, when we say that, toxic masculinity, we're not saying all masculinity is toxic. But we're saying that there is a subset, and it might actually be the prevailing notion, not even a subset, the prevailing notion is that there is this harmful set of behaviors and beliefs that have been passed down from generation to generation, and we can stop it. You want to talk about self-defining language? I talked about it a little bit, talking about, the words and beliefs and how like words affect you mentally and how words affect your behaviors.
And so getting more into like, how you want to define masculinity on its own, and us defining it for ourselves as opposed to letting the larger society define masculinity for us. Is that along the lines of what you're talking about?
Yeah, but also, the lens in which we view, like how we use language. Like, for example, I talked about females, I talked about hoes and bitches, and and how there are words that we, someone just commented.
Damn. Right.
And so, we're talking about how words affect our thoughts, and our thoughts affect our words. There is a cycle, and if you're dehumanizing someone, after a while, you're going to stop looking at them as human. And so there is, we have to be responsible with our language, because that shapes the narrative of our world, and whether it's and I love my ignorant rap music. I was raised on it, but there are points in times that I have to step back and go, that ain't it, man. That ain't it. The 90s are full with ideas and notions that just don't work.
Right. But the thing about it is, it's interesting when you talk to people coming out of jail, that is probably the hub of toxic masculinity. And you hear people when the conversations that are going on there, when they're totally outside the realm of female interaction, that toxic masculinity really, really blossoms. And so when you're talking about rap from the 90s into the 2000s, a lot of that was influenced by prison culture.
Okay.
And so you have a lot of people who are coming out with just, there's no one there to check you. There's no sense of accountability when you're in that kind of environment.
Absolutely.
And so you're just talking freely, but then that language transfers into the culture as people are coming out or going in and coming out, over and over again. So that's what you saw back in the 90s. That's why hip hop was the way it was. I was going to start, get into specific groups, but you see it throughout. But as it began, because, people say, well, would you say that about your mother? Would you say that about your sister? Well, if for 5 years you're not around your mother or your sister, you're going to pick up a particular kind of language.
Yeah.
That's not to excuse you, but recognize where that's coming from. And so now, as we are trying to evolve the way that we're having these conversations and the language that we want to use, we have to recognize that those are what the roots are. We have to cut those roots
Mm-hmm.
and begin a whole other conversation. So now when you're talking to young men about how you dress young ladies, you have to let them know, look, that's not acceptable. That may be part of the lexicon, but that's coming from this environment. Are you in that environment? No, you're not. Check where you are. This is how you talk to somebody. This is how you talk about somebody. And yeah, it all plays into the narrative, because if this is what you're thinking, that they're, bitches, hoes, that's what you think they are. Well, yeah, you're going to act as such. You're going to treat them as such. But, recognize that's not your reality. You're not surrounded by that. More than likely, you're coming from the suburbs where you've never seen a legit hoe before. So, so who are you really talking about? Are you talking about your mother? Are you talking about your sister? No, you're not.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and I the more you talk about that, the more I thought about, the echo chambers that we live in, and that,
mm-hmm.
sports teams, was a big
mm-hmm.
one, definitely in, high school and even middle school, was that there was this, this culture. And I didn't want to call it toxic masculinity, but it was, there was a culture
mm-hmm.
of a competition that extended past the field, in which
mm-hmm.
there was a culture of violence. There was a culture of
mm-hmm.
misogyny. And it was okay. It was locker room talk. And,
mm-hmm.
I heard some things that can never be repeated ever again.
Right.
Because
right.
it was a safe space for awful. And, even then I'm sitting there, as a young man, like, dog, like I don't feel like this towards people. Like, why, last year, those girls were your friends.
Right.
I mean, I think Biggie had a line where, bitches ain't my homegirls now. And I was just like, damn, dog, like, it was that idea that now women are sexual items, and no longer will we, connect with them on a human basis. They are just a goal to obtain. And that is, I've had to unpack and unlearn a lot of things when it comes to that language. But you did say something about self-defining masculinity, and I wanted to move on to that. When we define maleness or masculinity, we're quick to assume that to be a man means being aggressive, loud, violent, and dominant. Even more, maleness and masculinity is often defined by one's gender, their gender presentation, or how they perform maleness and masculinity. Very rarely are men given space to interrogate and create their own definition of masculinity. That includes being emotionally, mentally sound, and whole. Men often have to look outside of themselves for their first definition of what it means to be a man, so much that it often leaves a man in a dark, sad state of existence. Thieves in the Night by Black Star. Not free. Dang, I had the lyrics. I thought I knew it. Stage fright. Yeah, like it was a song that hit me in high school, and I was like, yo, like this is wild. Like these rappers are talking about how I feel, and it was the first time that I ever had, rappers actually say things that, made me go, wow, like I'm seen. Before I kind of had to like shape my life. Like I think I'm kind of like these rappers. Not strong, only aggressive, not free, we only licensed, not compassionate, only polite. Who's the nicest, not good, but well behaved. Chasing after death so we can call ourselves brave. Still living like mental slaves. Hiding like things in the night from life. And I mean, that stuck with me. Even as a teenager, it was just, not strong, only aggressive. Like the only way I can, show my strength is through violence, is through intimidation. And that might, well, what is the value? If my value and the currency of my strength is based on fear, am I really giving to the community? Am I really helping anyone? Not free, we only licensed. Like we not, we're my bad, my mom called. Yeah, see, look at that, love it.
She want to make sure you stay on point on the topic, man. That's what it is. What's up, Moms?
Absolutely, man, absolutely. So, what'd you say?
I was saying, what's up, Moms? Just making sure we give her a shout out for
you put it on Do Not Disturb, but then your mama got the pass to get past it. You forget that. Man, we're not free. We only license like their own. Like, and I look at that as the box of masculinity that we have. Like, you can't just be who you are. I remember like wearing a pink polo, and people were like, "Oh my God, you're wearing a pink polo," and I'm like, "This is fly. It matches the kicks. Like, come on, like, you know, shout out to Cameron for expanding that, you know, definition of masculinity a little bit. Not compassionate, only polite. Who's the nicest?" And that line resonated with me because I had to go to a finishing class for men. It was like gentlemen.
Okay.
You know, because people thought I was like an at-risk youth because my dad worked at night, so they never saw him. So I was in class and they were teaching us about chivalry. And one thing I learned in the chivalry class was, you know, just a bunch of like stand up when a woman leaves, you know, give her your coat, you know, walk on the outside of the street. But it was never about who the woman was. It was never a conversation about speaking to the woman as a person. It was always like, you are protecting, you are doing these, you know, actions that don't necessarily have anything to do with her personhood. It's just the fact she's a woman, you're a man, this is what you do. So there was never...
She's still object. She's still object. Even in that scenario, she's still object, right? Yeah,
there's never of like, what does she want? Like, maybe she likes to open up her own doors. No, she can't open the door because you're a man.
Right, right. She's not allowed to. Not in your presence.
Not in your presence. And if you don't do it, you're not a man, or you're not a real man. So you know, that was, you know, always an issue. And also not good but well behaved. Like these are actions. These aren't necessarily a belief system. They aren't any thought put into it.
Not a value system. Right.
And so like that definition of masculinity didn't feel right to me either. Even though it was good and nicer than some of the stuff I learned in the locker room or the street, you know, something that I talked to one of my homeboys about, a lot of the men around us that we were speaking to weren't at work when we were home. So like our dads and our, you know, our uncles or whatever who had jobs were working, you know, 9 to 5 at least, you know, maybe longer. So a lot of times the men that were like teaching us things in the neighborhood were honestly a little bummy. They, you know, they were the ones, you know, just at home chilling, not doing much. And these were the ones that had the most impact on us because they had the most time to just, you know, wax poetic about the terrible ideas of masculinity that they had. Like the men that we needed to listen to were working. Like they were out here, you know, taking care of home. So, and if you didn't have a father at home to get you, you know, get you straight, you were just out here. I mean, I was lucky to have a dad. And a lot of times I would come home and my dad was there talking to men about the birds and the bees or whatever. But there were some men who didn't have it. And so they got their information from the wrong sources. And so there wasn't a space for them to self-define. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, it's funny. There's a couple of different areas I want to go with that. One is kind of going back to the roots again of masculinity. And the roots of masculinity, of current day masculinity, really goes back to the days of Theodore Roosevelt and his push to really define masculinity in competition against, it's not the Elizabethan period. What period was going on in Europe at the time? I can't remember which period it was, but it's more, you know, considered more effeminate, you know, period and a softer period. And, you know, our views of Frenchmen, you know, came from that time period. And, you know, the marketing behind Theodore Roosevelt and the Rough Riders and all that stuff came during that period. It was in, you know, they were trying to push away that more European look of how we should be, of civility, and defined for us what masculinity is. That's where the ideas behind the violence and control and aggression all came from and continue with us for over a century and a half now. And that's really become our traditional look at masculinity. That's how we become to define masculinity as a culture. But when you step back and look at the damage that has done on the relationships, you know, recognizing again that this is really about how you can control. Even what you talked about in finishing school, when you talk about opening the door for a woman, that's about control. When you talk about, you know, pulling up the seat, that's about control. When you talk about giving her your coat, that's about control. Now, it may appear that you are making an effort to take care of them, which you may genuinely be trying to do. But at the same time, the roots of it is about control. How can I control the situation to make you safe? All right. I'm trying to make you safe. I'm trying to make you feel cared for, but I need to be able to control how that happens. And that's what you're really talking about. You know, you talk about having a father. Yeah, my father was there as well. My older brother was there. You know, I had, you know, uncles and play uncles
Yeah.
who were around as well. But the people who taught me the most about being a man and interacting with women were my aunts, my mother, my aunts, and their friends. You know, being the only kid in the room with 10 women, and you're hearing all these conversations, and they're schooling you. They're schooling you constantly on what you're supposed to be doing out there and how you're supposed to show up, how you're not supposed to show up. So I'm getting these lessons on a damn near weekly basis. And so I had to balance. I'm getting it from men and I'm getting it from women. And just recognizing that there is more than one way to operate, to demonstrate what it means to be a man. You don't have to be aggressive. Now I tell people this all the time. Just because you're not walking around with a chip on your shoulder and you're always angry and appearing to be angry doesn't mean that you're not aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
So I don't have to look like I'm angry and ready to fight every step that I take to be aware of what's happening. Absolutely. You know, I have to be able to trust that I'm going to be able to react to whatever I need to react to. But more than likely, in the environments I'm in, that's not happening. I don't need that. I don't need to be at that heightened level of defense, ready to pounce, you know. But a lot of men just maintain that all the time because this is what they believe they have to look like. This is how they have to appear. You don't have to appear like that. You know, so when you think about defining or redefining what masculinity is, yeah, you can be compassionate. You can be empathetic. That doesn't make you any less of a man. That makes you more of a caring man.
Yeah.
And that's the direction you want to go in because, again, it's about relationships. And if you're not able to adjust to the or adapt the kind of attitude necessary in order to have a healthy relationship, all that toxic masculinity that you're actually carrying around serves you no purpose at all.
No, absolutely, man. It's important, man. So any man, you know, if you're listening, you know, or you watch it later on, define your own masculinity. Like, take a step back. Not, you know, what your friends going to joke or your family's going to think. It's literally like who you are. Like, you know, and say like, you know what? I don't really like fighting. Like I've never liked fighting. I did it, but I don't want to fight. Like I don't. Like, let's talk about because like this vindication is not going to help me at all. Like, you know, we old, man. I like peace and joy. I like
the prospects of not going to jail.
I'm not going to jail. I'm too old for jail. Like I don't know the lingo. I don't know, you know, I might take the wrong trade. Like I don't need any of that to define my masculinity. Like I'm fine being peaceful. Like, you know, and it sucks because in the back of my mind, like I have to say, like, I ain't no punk. Like I have to say it, like, you know, but I'm like, dang, why do I have to say it? Because I still have remnants of toxic masculinity in me that like I have to exist in this world where this is the norm. Like, you know, and even being peaceful, you know, I remember being a kid, like I had to fight just for being peaceful. Because, you know, people are like, you know, what are you doing? Like, you know, from studying so much, you know, like, you don't want to hang out with us, you know, I got to fight. And I mean, I fought a lot just to have peace. Because I had started to define my masculinity as different. I was okay. Like I was okay being friends with women. You know, that was it was normal. You know, now, you know, people might say, oh, you're gay. And, you know, I'm like, I mean, come on. Like, you know, but why is that? And we use toxic masculinity as, you know, a spear in order to, you know, poke people and put them back in the pen. Like you say, oh, no, like you have to act this and behave this way, or you'll be ostracized. You know, you'll lose friends and family because you define your masculinity as different. And so, you know,
but do you, I mean, even saying all that, do you realize how much of that toxic masculinity is actually connected to insecurity?
Yes, man, it is.
You know, the fact that you have to go so far to point somebody else out, basically trying to take attention away from you, that's insecurity. You know, when you feel like you have to portray a particular image in order to either not be pointed out, not be harassed, to blend in, that's also insecurity. And so that's a lot of what you're talking about. A lot of these behaviors have their paws all in insecurity. You don't believe that on the other side of showing or being vulnerable, that you're going to be all right. So what you'd rather do is not show any vulnerability, not express your emotions, and just play it safe. You don't trust that
Yeah.
anyone's going to be able to listen to you and hold your feelings without doing something negative with them.
Yeah.
And so that's all insecurity right there. So how we begin to help people realize that, because when I talk about insecurity, I have to talk about the other side of it, which is being not resourceful, being resilient.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so part of overcoming toxic masculinity, I don't think we're here yet, but I got to throw it out there since I'm already there.
Go in.
You know, part of overcoming toxic masculinity is building resiliency in men, helping men understand that despite all of, you know, the things that you feel like you can't show, if you do show them, you'll be okay. It's not going to destroy your life to tell somebody that you're hurting.
Yeah.
Okay. More than likely, you're not living in an environment where someone's going to take advantage of you for expressing that. And when you're a kid, yeah, you'd be very careful with that in certain environments. But as an adult every day, you don't. And in terms of your relationships, if you can't express to somebody how you're being impacted by whatever experience you're having, you're not building that bond, that emotional bond with somebody. So you have to be able to do that. But oftentimes, the reason why we can't is because we don't feel safe. We don't feel secure. But you are strong enough to handle whatever happens after that. Okay, somebody tells you, suck it up. You know what? You'll be okay. Just don't deal with that person the same way anymore.
Absolutely.
But you will be okay.
I will say, Tariiq, you know, just thinking about what you're saying, it reminds me of, you know, you lifting heavy weights. What do you do when you're lifting real heavy weights? You get a spotter.
Yeah.
You got somebody there that you trust that can help you carry that weight. And so when you're dealing with things and you have people you're close to, you it's not that you aren't strong if you let someone else spot you.
Right. True.
You know, that is your emotional safety. That is, you know, giving to someone. And there is that bond that is, you know, created when you have someone that is there. And this is important. Relationships are important to have, you know, those that, you know, you love and trust. And when you're insecure in yourself, you can't trust. And, you know, and with that, you know, that definitely moves to the next, you know, conversation is empathy and compassion. If you're raised with the notion that empathy is the enemy of masculinity, men learn that expressing sadness or fear or hurt are seen as weak, soft, and feminine. And increased focus is then placed on the use of anger to express themselves. There is an empathy deficit that occurs from the narrowing view and shows you how to teach boys and shows you, you know, how to, you know, teach boys and men to recognize, name, and express their emotions effectively. There was a need to, you know, destroy this, you know, empathy deficit, manage anger, and effectively confront and reduce aggressive behavior. The goal is to become assertive, respectful, confident, and compassionate and emotional man. We need to increase our emotional intelligence and add to our emotional toolbox. And that's, you know, emotional toolbox is really big for me. You know, I realized like, as I was learning and, you know, growing my emotional intelligence, I had a hammer and a drill. And these are the two things that I can use to fix any problem. I can hit things with the hammer or I can drill things. And you know, this was all I had. And sometimes, you know, you might need a Phillips head screwdriver. And you might need some pliers. You know, there's so many things that you need in your emotional toolbox that you aren't given. That, you know, hitting it will make it better. Like that, you know, sounds insane. You know, if anybody's building anything, you know, hitting it does not make it better. And so there is this lack of empathy. There is a lack of, you know, suck it up, like you said. And that actually caring about others is considered weakness. When in fact, we are herd animals. Like we're people. We live in families. We live in towns and cities and states and countries. We are herds. And so when you're in a herd, what brings together is that communal relationship. And so what forms stronger bonds is that empathy and love and compassion. And so you'll see, you know, what's the problem? A lot of times they say, you know, men are not in the home. But men don't know how to create homes or maintain homes. They don't know how to, you know, be empathetic, be compassionate, and actually just give, you know, and become part of that family and community. So a lot of times we do have men who are not within these, homes, because toxic masculinity hasn't allowed them to, be able to function. A
Right.
lot of times, men can be dangers to the home, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
the children or the women, because of, the lack of empathy and a lack of compassion,
Right.
and the lack of, accountability. So, you wonder, like, why aren't men in homes? A lot of times they aren't wanted there,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't want to be there, or both. And so, empathy and compassion is super lacking, and
Yeah.
that there is no accountability.
I was having a conversation with a brother who just showed up on here on Shem earlier. We were talking about the lack of black male therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And, the last statistics I saw was that black males represent 0.07% of all therapists. 0.07%.
Wow,
That means for every 1,000 therapists, there's only 7 black men.
man.
Okay. And so the conversation we're having, I was saying the reason for that is because a lot of black men struggle with empathy and compassion. You can't do my job without having a great deal of empathy and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. And if you look at it, empathy is really about being able to understand somebody, and then the compassion, being able to understand it without the judgment. It's hard to do that. And we do struggle with that. The thing is, we have the ability because we find times where we're expressing it. It's just being able to do it consistently that we struggle with. And when we do it, if you recognize the time when we are the most compassionate and the most empathetic, it's for things that we actually value.
Mm-hmm.
And so we may do that with our friends.
Yeah.
I remember doing research before around black men and how we can be very, very hard on ourselves in certain situations, but not be as hard on someone going through the same situation. That right there is saying you are demonstrating empathy and compassion for somebody who's going through the same thing you are, and you're not, you're showing up for them. You do know how to show up for them. So we have the ability, but when you only value what the thing is, so where are your values? What are you actually demonstrating value for? Mm-hmm. You're saying that you care for your family, right? Well, how are you actually demonstrating that care? How are you showing up? And if you're not showing up in an emotional way because you feel like you're not familiar with it, recognize you are. You just have to figure out how to transfer those skills.
Yeah.
Take the tools out of your belt and put them in your box.
Yeah.
You can take those same skills that you're using with your friends when someone's hurting and he's sitting there complaining to you about what's going on at home with his wife. You're showing him empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing at home. The question is, why don't you? What's stopping you from doing it? Is it fear? Is it fear that you will be judged if you're going to do it? Is it feeding into that insecurity? Do you believe that, if you do begin to demonstrate that sense of compassion and empathy for your kids or for your wife, that now they're going to take advantage of you? Do you feel less safe at home than you do when you're out with your friends? And so you have to look at that for yourself. What are you truly valuing? And how are you actually demonstrating that value? But you can do it. We can definitely do it. We have the ability. We just don't do it in the places where we really need to do it.
Oh, that's really strong, man. It's really, really important. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can even show like compassion and empathy for your favorite sports team. But when it
comes
to
exactly.
A person, that you're in love with, or a person you're supposed to be taking care of, you're just like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, your favorite sports team, your favorite quarterback gets injured, and you're just like, oh man, I'm distraught.
Right.
Feel for him.
Right.
But your kid,
right.
Falls down, you're like, shake it off, walk it off.
Right.
Like, your kid is hurting, man. I mean, go ahead and help your kid.
What do you value? What do you value most?
And speaking of sports, man, a spirit of cooperation and not competition. Part of toxic masculinity is like everything is a contest. I have to win. I have to be the best. I have to dominate. And there is no, idea of teamwork. I really hate the use of the alpha designation. I'm an alpha male, alpha whatever. Because I mean, if you understand like the researchers and the person who coined the term, they were like, yo, you know what? My bad. We were wrong. We were dealing with some wolves that were in, captivity. This actually isn't how wolves operate. Wolves operate in packs of family members. Like, and the leaders are the mom and dad. and the older wolves. But, we decided that people who are natural leaders are, supposed to, take charge and, just do things. And I'm like, no, we're a communal people. And we look at the people who have the best traits for this scenario are the ones that should be in charge. Instead of, someone that is, a natural leader. And, and there is no such thing. There are people who learn things and people who grow. You may have an aptitude for it, but to lead, you have to, have a knowledge base. You have to have integrity. You have to have respect. You have to have compassion because you're responsible for others. And I think a lot of times we use it as, once again, like a domination. Like I'm in charge, I'm controlling, instead of, a compassionate idea of cooperation. Because if you take
how do I share this power?
Yeah. How do I, just distribute it? No, I want to, the buck stops here. I want to be the person who tells people what to do, even though you don't know what you're doing. And I think that is a big problem. Like a lot of men believe that they're automatically supposed to be in charge because they're men. And I'm like, if your wife has a degree in economics, why are you the one balancing the checkbook? She's nice, like she is. You're a man though, so I should be in control of the money or the finances. And that person has a degree, like they're good at the finances. But toxic masculinity tells us that we should not interrogate that, and that this is what it is. You're a man. This is who you are. This is your role, and no one should question it. Even though you should honestly, in any relationship, find out who's the best and work together. Like it's a team. Like what is your skill set? What is my skill set? How can we merge these two? But a lot of times, we've been taught that the man is the head of the household. And I'm like, okay, all right, if you're the head, that's cool. But can you do anything as a head? You just sitting there. Just,
Can you handle responsibilities of that? Do you have the ability to discern properly in order to make sure you're going in the right direction, doing the right thing? Do you have the power of discernment? Can you make good decisions? So I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine years ago, and she said, and she's coming from a Christian base with it. My husband always has the final word. My husband will always have the final word. I will have to follow him. Even if he makes bad decisions, I still have to follow him. That's what, my faith says. And I'm like, that doesn't even make logical sense. If the person is a bad decision maker, you're saying you're still going to follow them? Come on, man. Come on. Don't even put yourself in that kind of position. But you have to, if you want to be a leader, recognize that there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and you have to be a good decision maker. Just because you're a man doesn't mean you're a good decision maker. Guys like to think a lot of times that we think logically and women think emotionally, and so, we make better decisions because we think logically. We're not all logical thinkers. I mean, a lot of guys are thinking very emotionally with their emotions and reacting with their emotions as opposed to thinking things through.
I mean, we can look at prisons, man. I mean, we need to shut them down. But there are a lot of men in there for thinking emotionally. And we started like men are logical. Now, man, and emotions are violence. Like anger is an emotion. And so we try to say that, women aren't, logical. If you're making all your decisions based off anger, that is not logic. I mean, because you're not actually taking the time to think about your actions. And even if you're saying that you're logical and you're making moves, let's say, to exploit women, let's just be honest. That is not a logical conversation. That is emotional. Like your lust and your desire is not taking into account another person's feelings, another person's, mental state. And you're doing, these activities because it's what you want. And so, that's an emotional response.
Yes,
that is
100%.
Not a logical response would be like, I should actually care about that other person's feelings. Yeah.
I should think about the consequences of my actions. Yeah. But we're not doing that. We're not thinking about the consequences.
No.
We're thinking about, okay, how do I fulfill this right now? You only live once. You know what I'm saying? YOLO all day. You only live once. So let me go ahead and do it. Forget the consequences. And I think a lot of us forget about that. That is part of being held accountable. That is part of being responsible. Recognizing what the consequences are going to be for your behaviors and for your actions. And when you don't do that because you believe that, either you're infallible or someone else could take the fall for you, then, you're really not showing your sense of honor or, your principles, you
Absolutely.
know? I'm curious. I mean, let me ask you about that, Lawrence. When you think about toxic masculinity, how does toxic masculinity actually, um, work in contrast or in concert with your sense of honor?
Mm.
Can you be a toxic person and use toxic masculinity but still be honorable? Is there a way for those two things to work in concert together,
I mean,
or are they
absolutely.
all? Mhm,
I mean, but you have to look at what is that honor? Where is that metric coming from? Is it coming from
mhm.
a personal view of honor, like am I true to myself, or is it the acceptable behavior in society? Like, in some
Right.
countries you have honor killings in which you're allowed to kill a woman who has done something to shame you or your family. Is that
Hmm.
honorable? To me, no. But in that
No.
society, they have
Society,
set
right.
up things that say, okay, this is okay. I mean,
But
before, there was a time where it was
and
honorable to beat your wife.
and is that not even that? Is that not the definition of toxic masculinity?
It is. It's absolutely,
Yeah.
man.
Right.
Absolutely. Like,
Right.
I mean, it's right there. Like, I really wanted to do this room because I've seen some pushback when people like, there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. I'm like, dog, like women just got rights. Let's just be clear. And men are still
Right.
trying to take them away. Why? Because they believe that a man should be able to tell a woman what to do and how to live.
It's
And
that
that's toxic
domination.
masculinity,
That
that
domination.
domination,
Yeah.
that control exists, from the legislature to, our interpersonal relationships. It's
Hmm.
everywhere. And, we have to call
Hmm.
it out. Just like, you have to call any hazard out and put some red tape
Hmm.
around it, some yellow tape, and say, how are we going to clean this
Right.
up? So, when we
Right.
call it out, we're saying that this is a space where we need to develop, a space we need to, actually clean this up so people can feel safe. And I think,
Hmm.
sometimes we look at it, in the U.S. saying, oh, I mean, we're not killing women, so it's okay. But we are.
Right.
Women are still dying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially black
Let's be
women.
clear.
Especially black women. Especially black women. Especially black women in hospitals. Giving birth.
Trans women, trans women are being killed
Trans
because
women.
of
Yeah.
toxic
Hmm.
masculinity.
Oh
And
yeah, for sure.
that goes into my next point is moving beyond tolerance. I think there was a big push for tolerance in which like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm a tolerate something, but we know tolerate doesn't mean you like it, doesn't mean
Right.
you accept it. It just means that I might not kill it. I might not kill that person.
Hmm.
We have to get to a point and move beyond tolerance. And moving
Hmm.
beyond tolerance, we get to acceptance, then we get to appreciation, and then finally we get to celebration. Expanding tolerance will help people recognize and appreciate that differing opinions, beliefs, practices, sexualities, genders of family, as well as the community. Like we
Hmm.
have diversity in our families and it needs to be embraced, shared, and celebrated. Our family is stronger and our community is enriched because of diversity within it. I mean, we
Hmm.
even in my life, I've definitely seen where like, okay, a family member is of a different, sexuality. I'm like,
Hmm.
what does that do? Nothing. Your family.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
Honestly, and I, you know what? But I do care because the world cares. I
Hmm.
personally don't care what your sexuality is, but I'm gonna fight if someone tries to say something or do something because you're trying to love who you love, and that's the
Right.
problem. Like, I'm growing up in toxic masculinity. If you're not a certain type of man, then you're not a man. And so,
Hmm.
especially if you're gay, then you're definitely not a
Hmm.
man. And I'm
Right.
like, no, that person is a man. They
Still a
said they're a
man.
man. How are you on the board of what's a man and what's not a man? Like, how are you the judge, jury, and executioner of manhood?
Right.
And so
Right.
it never made sense to me. And even as now as I grow older, I'm just like, okay, a trans man is a man.
Hmm.
Me saying that didn't take anything away from me.
Hmm.
I mean, and I value that person as a human being,
Hmm.
as a person, and they are a man. So okay, that's it is what it is. But some people, and once again, we get back to the circle of domination and control. Is that I
Hmm.
want to dominate and control the definition of who you are. So I
Hmm.
control, everything I view and survey. And toxic masculinity is a lack of looking inward, but expressing outward
Mhm.
how you feel and your actions.
But also think about this too, getting back to, the insecurity point, that even those guys who are constantly saying, well, you're gay, the ones who are trying to define what masculine is versus what masculinity isn't, they're also coming from a place of insecurity
Mm,
and a place of fear, and so by calling somebody out and saying, well, because you're gay, you're not a man. Well, if you were to say that they are a man, they're still gay. Well, what does that say about you?
yeah.
And they're fearful to have that even begin that thought process, to be able to define masculinity as something more than just how you interact with women. So now it's like, well, okay, if they're a man and they like men, and I'm a man and I'm supposed to like women, well, is it possible that I might like men too?
Mm,
So there's a lot of insecurity even behind the idea of trying to define what masculinity is. So again, going back to what you said before, how to begin to define this for yourself, and a lot of that goes into being able to go beyond that tolerance and being able to champion, because once you can begin to champion what manhood is and what it looks like beyond what you have grown up to think that it is, that toxic masculinity, then you're able to you're letting your guard down. You're feeling safe
yeah.
to be able to say there's more to this than just how I am behaving. You're still a man.
Absolutely.
Even if you like other men, you're still a man.
Still a man.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It takes a lot of security to be able to say that.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I totally believe in the self-defining of masculinity. I appear courtesy of myself. So, anybody says, you're not a real man. And I'm like, right. And when's the last time you made one? Like, did you build men out there? Like, you out here? Like, do you have a license in, what real manhood is? You don't.
Right.
And so, and that it is that insecurity and lack of compassion, man. Like it really bothers me, and it's something that I'm grateful that I can work with others to talk about it. Is that stop trying to define other people's masculinity. Like it stops at you. Like you define masculinity for you, and then with people on the street, like leave them alone. Like I mean, they're doing just fine, man. I mean, and then once you start to understand the diversity in masculinity, you can start hugging your homeboys tighter. You can tell them you miss them. You can tell them you love them, because you got to get free, man. You get free from the shackles of toxic masculinity, and you'll find peace. Because when you have these rigid definitions of masculinity, it becomes very fragile. And in any slight infraction, and now you're questioning, your whole existence, because you've never taken the time to self-define. I mean, I don't care if you're not 6 feet, you can't bench 350. You're still a man. Like you good. You good, bro. Like you good.
Right.
And so we got to get to that point.
Yeah, 100%. I agree 100%. I think a lot of people, once they can trust that, not trying to define other people, let me backtrack. I think what gets in people's way oftentimes is their own fear of judgment.
Yeah.
Fear that someone's going to judge them if they're not judging somebody else. So if you don't call somebody out, or say if you have a conversation with somebody and they say, oh, look at that. I'm trying not to use any explicit terms here, but look at that guy over there. You know what I'm saying? And you don't comply with that, then now you're going to be judged as possibly being gay.
Yeah.
And so you're going to jump all over it. So let me jump on it. Yeah, look at them, blah, 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 blah. So you're jumping into it because of your own insecurities. You don't want to be judged as such, And so again, it's about being strong enough to be different. It's being resilient, recognizing that your resilience is the thing that's going to get you through any situations. You're not going to falter if someone judges you. That's not going to end your life.
Yeah.
Again, if you find yourself in situations where you're always being judged, you always feel judged, find new situations to be in.
Absolutely.
Because you're not safe. You don't feel safe and you're not safe. Go somewhere else. Find yourself around other people. But if you're fighting so hard just to fit in, that you are going to, and this makes you think about times where white folks say, I'm not racist, but they're hanging around other people who are,
Yeah.
and they're not defending people of color when other people speak badly of them. It's the same kind of thing. Check your environment. Why are you around people who are behaving that way, even if you're not feeling safe?
I definitely feel that, man. I mean, I'm just thinking about, some of the friends I grew up with versus the friends that I have now. And I see like there was a time in which I'm like, you know what? Like your views and your values don't match mine. Like,
Right.
And I can't, I'm actually giving up too much to be around you. It's going against, me as a person. So now I'm either telling you not to say that or wishing I would have told you not to say that. Wishing I would have told you not to do that. Instead of, me finding a group of people in a tribe in which I can be naturally. I mean, the dudes I hang out with, don't call them the bitches. You don't. Like, it's just not.
Mine either.
It's just we don't have to. We don't sit around and make derogatory comments against women. And, some people might, ask us, what's wrong with us? And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, there is no reason for you to act like that. And so, that moves to our next point of, sex and sexuality. Is the importance of boundary setting and respecting other people's boundaries. Boundaries being the fundamental building blocks that define who we are, how we treat ourselves, and how we treat other people. Owning and embracing our own sexuality and respecting other people's sexualities, accepting rejection. And that leads on further to consent. We're going to get to that a little later because, cats need to learn. But sex and sexuality, man, like sexuality is on a spectrum. People are bi and people are heterosexual. People are, and everything is a thing.
Yeah.
So, and that
100%
goes back to our conversation about control and domination is that, how are you defining other people's sexuality? Like, how are you trying to control another person's? Like, how are you saying their sexuality is bad if it's multiple consenting adults? Like, that is what they do. And, your healthy masculinity is figuring out what you do and making sure that it is healthy and not harmful to others. And then respecting the fact that other people do things differently. That's it.
Right.
That's it right there. It's just, other people,
But that comes down to the whole thing. I think that speaks to everything we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Not respecting people to be different. You don't have respect for that. And so that's why you have such a rigid and narrow definition of what masculinity is, because you want everybody to be the same. You feel safer with sameness.
Yeah.
Even if it goes against what you really believe or really feel, you just feel safer with sameness. You feel safer being in a crowd of people that look just like you and behave just like you, and not standing out. I think that's one of the main things that we deal with when we're younger, is not wanting to stand out. And you see the ones who actually, I'm thinking back to like middle school and high school right now, the ones who stood out the most were the guys who are already out the closet.
Yeah.
And just, they were coming into their own sexuality and they were comfortable with it. And they stood out the most because everyone else looked alike. We either dressed alike, we talked alike, we did not want to stand out at all. I know for me, even going back to middle school, I had braces from 6th grade to 8th grade. I had to get glasses like late 6th grade going to 7th grade. I refused to wear them because I didn't want to be that dude. I didn't want to be the dude with the braces and the glasses. So I couldn't see the board for like 2 years, to avoid being that guy because I didn't want to stand out. Even in my behavior, I didn't try my best in school at that age because I wasn't trying to stand out. I might have been smart, but I wasn't going to show it because that felt like a vulnerability. That felt like a weakness. That felt like something people could take advantage of and being called out for and be made to feel different about. So I fought against that and tried my best to blend in. It wasn't until I realized, okay, I might fail and not have a future that I said, forget all that. I'm going to go ahead and step out there and be who I'm going to be, and have never turned back and have never regretted that. But I think at that age, a lot of us try so hard just to fit in, and a lot of us never grow out of that. We just try and maintain that sense of sameness because that's where we feel the safest.
Absolutely, man. It's a lot of Peter Pans in here, man. A lot of Peter
Mm-hmm.
Pans, bro.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, being in middle school and I loved to read. I couldn't let people know that I
Mm-hmm.
loved to read, so I had to go to the library real quick, pick my books up, and tell them to hold them for me,
Mm-hmm.
so I can come back later and get them, because it was actually really cool to have a really light book bag. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
had a really, like, it was like edgy, you know what I'm saying? Like, so some kids would just have a regular book bag looking real thin, wearing it real high, because that shows you I don't care about school. And I'm like, dog, I love school. Like, my book bag should be super heavy, but now I just got to
Mm-hmm.
wait till nobody's looking to put books in. And,
Right.
and later on as an adult, I'm like, dang, dog, I really was in toxic masculinity. I was really like
Mm-hmm.
just trying to fit in, not
Mm-hmm.
self-defining, and letting, the my environment dictate, who I am, instead of
Right.
dictating myself and my environment. And you think about the strength is that controlling that, is that, like, I am who I am, and I will carve space, for myself,
Mm-hmm.
in that. But instead, we allow us to be shaped, by, that's gay, or, a
Mm-hmm.
man wouldn't do that. A real man would. And, you take, internalize the homophobia, and, you internalize the misogyny till it puts you in a corner, to the point where
Mm-hmm.
you don't know who you are, and you haven't
Right.
developed
Right.
any boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, man.
And it's a matter of being able to be comfortable with yourself. And a lot
Absolutely.
of people, again, a lot of people just aren't. It takes a level of maturity. It takes a level of acceptance. I mean, I have conversations with my clients now about that, where they're still fighting against, there's a lot of insecurity there. There's a lot of poor self-esteem. And you recognize, again, that's about they're judging themselves because they're worried about other people judging them. And so because they're not willing to accept certain parts of themselves because they're afraid of how people are going to judge them, they are in constant turmoil, constant emotional turmoil about that. And you have to be able to learn how to just accept different parts of yourself. Not saying that there's no room for growth. You still grow, but you have to be able to look at yourself and say, hey, this is who I am. I'm comfortable with this. And you are going to have to accept me for this. I don't want to be tolerated. I do want to be accepted.
Mm.
Hopefully celebrated at some point too. But that takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of inner strength to be willing to accept yourself. And a lot of people just don't have it. They don't have it.
Okay. Yeah, we're running out of time, but I just had one conversation. We can't talk about toxic masculinity without talking about consent. What
Mm-hmm.
consent is, what consent is not, how to ask for consent.
Then we have a then we have a couple conversations about that a couple years ago.
I feel like, and I mean, hey, we got to talk
Yeah.
about it, every single time,
Yeah.
man.
Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back.
Cats not feeling it, man. You got to
Mm-hmm.
ask for consent, how to accept it, the components of it, and definitely autonomy, giving and receiving consent. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this is the epitome of, the conversation that we had about control, about
Mm-hmm.
domination,
Mm-hmm.
and how, men are told, this is what they're supposed to go get, and this is what
Right.
women are supposed to give up. I hit
Mm-hmm.
that. There's so much language that we use to define sex that poisons us. It's toxic, because now it's
Mm-hmm.
not about sharing an intimate moment. It's more about taking something from someone. It's more
Mm-hmm.
about tricking someone into giving something,
Mm-hmm.
for the lowest price that we can,
Mm-hmm.
get. It's
Yo,
about,
all I had to do was buy one hamburger. She was good to go.
yeah, man. And honestly, she liked you, sir. It wasn't about the
Right.
hamburger. And
Right. Exactly.
you don't even recognize that she viewed you as a person that she wanted to have sex with. But instead, you
Right.
have this idea that you tricked the woman, and now it's
Right.
more valuable.
You
And
gamed her. Right.
you game,
Mm-hmm.
the game is a game. I mean, and
Mm-hmm.
it's terrible, because consent is when another person agrees without coercion, without force, to engage in a sexual activity, any
Mm-hmm.
sexual activity. And you should be asking for consent, for anything you do. I mean, honestly, even if you're going to kiss someone that haven't kissed, or in general, and a lot of consent may be nonverbal cues. But I will
Mm-hmm.
say that a lot of men need to give verbal cues, because you don't have the emotional intelligence to understand nonverbal cues.
Right. That's exactly what it is. A lack of emotional intelligence right there. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that woman is moving away, and you like, nah, I just gotta try harder. She playing hard to get, leave her alone. That's harassment, dog. Like,
Right.
but
Right.
toxic masculinity turns you to Pepe Le Pew. And so you got to recognize that, no, like making your desires known and a woman returning said desire is a beautiful thing. You forcing your desire on another person is awful. You should go to jail. And we need to get to a point where consent is natural. It's not no means no. It's yes means yes. In which we're going for enthusiastic consent. And I mean,
I was just about to say that. That's the word I learned from you. Enthusiastic consent. Yes.
I learned it from beautiful black women who told me to read books and figure it out for yourself, and I did. And you learn about consent. You learn that
right.
You get out of those murky waters. You get out of the gray areas, and this is something you have to learn over time. And and it's something that we have been taught. And we have to unlearn how to view consent and how to view bodily autonomy. Like a woman doesn't owe you anything. Like I pay for dinner.
She has boundaries, man. There's boundaries there.
Boundaries, dog.
You have to respect those boundaries. And it's not on you to define the boundaries for them. I mean, that's another thing. I think we just suffer from lack of good boundaries all around. So we don't know how to have boundaries. So we don't know how to respect them. So whether it's somebody's body, somebody's time, somebody's energy, we don't understand what it means to have healthy boundaries. We don't have boundaries with our significant others, our families, our friends, our kids. You have to have strong boundaries and learn how to maintain them. And that'll help you respect other people's boundaries. But when you don't have good boundaries yourself, you're going to be stepping all over people's boundaries. That's her body. That's her boundary. So if she says, don't cross it, or hasn't given you permission to cross it, guess what? You're stepping on her boundaries. That's a sign of disrespect.
Yeah.
You can't get past it. That is total disrespect right there. So what you're telling her is that I don't respect you enough to obey your boundaries. And yet, I want you to give me some. Come on, man. Does that make sense?
I'm the logical person in the situation.
Right. Right.
Yeah, man.
I'm always thinking with this head. Yeah, whatever.
So I mean, we probably need to talk about consent. It would take an hour. We could take an hour
to
just talk about consent. But I did.
And we do have. Remember, we have a podcast on that
You're right.
We have a podcast on that from years ago. Yeah, so that's out there. We do have a deep conversation about that from before. So
definitely, man. Check starting with today. Startingwithtoday.org. Before we close out, I want to give a shout out to Tariiq. Always great.
Brother, it's great to be here with you, Charlene. Don't worry about those pictures, girl. You ain't gonna see the old pictures of me. She put up there if you want to see old pictures. You're not getting no classic pictures of Tariiq.
Hey, man.
This is the only picture you're getting right here.
You better screenshot it. But yeah, man, today was a day in which, I'm thankful for Charlotte, and starting with today, got me a chance to talk about a conversation that is near and dear to my heart, man. I want dudes to be free. I want dudes to get to the point where they can just be like, you know what, you breathe easier, man. I used to sit, I couldn't sit with my back to the door when I went to a restaurant. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm okay.
I don't. I still don't.
I'm fine. If they're gonna come get me, they're gonna come get me. But I'm not going down soft. But it was that constant stress. It was a constant just chip on my shoulder. Like, yo, anytime I see somebody, I got to square up. And I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm gonna fight. And I'm thinking the last time I had to get in a fight, it was college. No, I'm lying. But the last time I really got in a fight was college. And I don't want to fight no more, man. But I will say, man, we got a plug starting with today. It's a charitable nonprofit in the D.C. area with a mission of creating, sustaining, and enhancing the professional, mental, financial wellness of underserved adults by providing customized training and local resources. Through its mission, starting with today ignites a fresh start for individuals in various aspects of life by providing succinct, fun, interactive, and culturally relevant programming. Honestly, man, we just helping people. We just out here, doing meeting people where they are, whether on the internet, in the barbershop, in the beauty salon, on the street. We just trying to give y'all the good news. Give y'all the non-denominational good news. It's just a service to the community, man. I love the organization. I'm on board. Been on it for a couple of years, and I'm grateful that I can just share, man. I mean, and just to give the platform and to elevate, conversation.
That's how I got in there. You're the one who got me in.
Hey, man,
you created a platform for me. So no, I thank you for that. You being on the board is the reason why I'm here right now.
You heard the call, man. I mean, tell you, Charlene was like, hey, I got this idea. I want to, bring some, counseling and therapy conversations to a barbershop. And I was like, say no more. I know a guy. I'm actually at an event with the guy. Shout out to Dr. Jason Nichols. And
Yep.
you were there too. And I was like, yep, all right, let's build. And years later, we've been in barbershops. We've had these conversations. Yep. And, we're just doing the work, man. And I just love the fact that we can make an impact, because every impact counts. I mean, it's we're whittling away at toxic masculinity,
Right.
and that's the goal. If you can get one person to be like, you know what, someone's behavior is wrong, let me try to change some things, or let me try to fix myself.
Mm-hmm.
You're fixable, but you just need the tools, and you can build your own tools, but you can also ask people for help. So definitely, man, this has been super dope, man. Thank you again, Tariiq.
Without doubt, man. Thank you for getting me in here.
Where can people find you, Tariiq, on the internet?
They can find me right here at IG at Tariiq Omari. You can find me on Facebook at Tariiq Omari Walton. You can go to my website, TariiqOmariWalton.com. You can check out my podcast. It's on, thanks to Charlene, my podcast is now on Apple Music. It's on SoundCloud, and it's on Spotify. It's called Kings of the Heart. I do that with my brother, my partner in crime, Dr. John Hart. Again, Kings of the Heart. You can also find us on kingsoftheheart.com. I'm everywhere, man. You type my name into a search engine.
What you do? We're just thinking you're just another black man trying to help others, man. What you do?
No. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm in private practice. I see mostly couples, but I work with a lot of individuals. I'm working with a lot of black men right now. A lot of black men are coming to therapy. Don't let people fool you. Black men are coming to therapy. Black men read books, and they are coming to therapy. But yeah, I'm in private practice in Largo, Maryland, in Silver Spring, Maryland as well. So even though, most of the therapists I know are all booked up right now, keep looking, get on people's waiting lists, if you're not in an emergency situation, but get out there, get on those waiting lists, and hopefully somebody will be able to get to you soon, and get the help you need. Even if you're not in dire straits, hey, it's good to talk to somebody. It's good to talk to somebody just to get things out and get a professional perspective. Don't just rely on your friends.
Absolutely. I'm Lawrence Cosby. I'm an attorney. I don't do that type of law, or whatever you was going to ask. I mainly do IP law. But you can find me on the internet, the Cosby, TheCosby. I just be tweeting. But sometimes it's good stuff. But I just want to thank you for watching, and if you're watching this in the future, thank you. I appreciate you. This is a time displaced situation. Stay safe, wear your mask, socially distance. You do all the things, I mean, and just stay alive, man, and do what you can to make the world a better place.
And keep others safe too, man. Keep other people safe too. Yeah, man.
Community, once again.
And compassion and empathy.
Empathy. All right, man.
All right, bro.
One.
Take care.